The marble floor was covered in blood-red ink from scattered financial documents. When Ethan Cole realized the numbers didn't add up, millions were disappearing. The woman standing above him, Manhattan's most feared CEO, didn't know her empire was being stolen from the inside. And the man doing it controlled the one hospital that could save Ethan's dying daughter. In that moment, Ethan had two choices: walk away and let his child suffer, or step into a war between billionaires that could destroy everything he had left. He should have walked away. But fathers don't get that luxury. If you want to see how far desperation can push an ordinary man, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The rain came down like punishment. Ethan Cole pressed his daughter closer against his chest as he ran through the Manhattan streets, one hand holding her small body, the other clutching a white pharmacy bag that had cost him the last $73 in his checking account. Maya's fever had spiked to 103 2 hours ago. Her pediatrician had warned him about infections, about complications, about things Ethan couldn't afford to think about while he was still 6 blocks from their apartment. "Daddy?" Maya whispered against his neck. Her voice sounded like paper tearing. "I'm cold." "I know, baby. Almost home." The lie tasted familiar. He'd been telling versions of it for 3 years now, since the accident, since the funeral, since the morning he'd woken up and realized he was the only parent Maya had left. Almost home. Almost better. Almost enough money. Almost. Thunder cracked overhead and Maya flinched. Ethan picked up his pace, boots splashing through puddles that soaked through to his socks. The medication in the bag was supposed to bring her fever down within an hour. The pharmacist had made him wait 20 minutes while they called his insurance company 3 times. He'd stood there watching the clock, watching other customers get their prescriptions in 30 seconds, watching his daughter's pale face in the reflection of the security monitor. The Grandview Hotel appeared through the rain like a lit castle, all glass and gold, and the kind of money that didn't worry about $73. Ethan normally walked past it without looking. Tonight he cut through the circular driveway toward the covered entrance, just trying to get Maya out of the rain for 30 seconds while he caught his breath. The doorman stepped forward with an umbrella. "Sir, are you a guest?" "Just passing through," Ethan said, already moving toward the lobby doors. The warmth hit him first, then the light, then the sudden awareness that he was dripping rainwater all over marble that probably cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. A woman in an evening gown glanced at him with the kind of look that said security. Ethan ignored her. He had maybe 10 seconds before someone politely asked him to leave. Maya coughed against his shoulder, a wet, rattling sound that made his stomach tighten. "Shh, baby, you're okay." He shifted her weight and pulled out his phone to check the nearest subway entrance. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, from the exhaustion that had been building for 3 years, the kind that lived in his bones now, that no amount of sleep could touch. He'd worked a double shift yesterday, another one tomorrow. In between, he had to keep a 6-year-old alive, fed, medicated, and convinced that the world was still a safe place. Some days he wasn't sure which job was harder. He was turning back toward the door when someone slammed into him from the left. The impact spun him sideways. His grip on Maya tightened instinctively, his other arm flying out for balance. He heard paper scattering, heels clicking, a sharp intake of breath. When he looked down, the pharmacy bag was on the floor. So were about 3 dozen sheets of paper covered in numbers and graphs and the kind of corporate letterhead that cost money to print. "Watch where you're—" The woman's voice cut off mid-sentence. Ethan looked up. She was younger than her tone suggested, maybe 30, dark hair pulled back tight enough to hurt, a black suit that probably cost what he made in a month, and eyes that were doing something he'd seen 1,000 times in his work, calculating, measuring, deciding whether he was worth the effort of finishing her sentence. "Sorry," Ethan said automatically. He knelt down, still holding Maya with one arm, and started gathering papers with his free hand. "I wasn't looking." The woman knelt across from him, snatching documents with movements that were too precise to be casual. "These are confidential. I'm not reading them. You're looking right at them." Yes, she wasn't wrong. The numbers were facing him. His brain processed them the same way it processed everything else, automatically, cataloging patterns and inconsistencies without conscious effort. It was the skill that had kept him employed for the last 8 years, the thing he was good at when he wasn't good at much else. And these numbers were wrong. Not wrong like a typo, wrong like a lie. He handed her a stack of papers without commenting. Maya shifted against him, her forehead burning against his neck. He needed to get home. He needed to get the medicine into her. He needed to stop kneeling on the floor of a luxury hotel with a woman who looked at him like he was a stain on her expensive carpet. But his eyes had already caught the pattern. Your acquisition totals don't match your transfer logs, he said quietly. The woman's hand froze halfway to another paper. What? Oh, the Clearwater digital acquisition. You show 14 million in transferred assets, but your account reconciliation only reflects 11.2. That's a gap of 2.8 million, she finished. Her eyes had changed. Still calculating, but different now, sharper. How did you see that in 3 seconds? Ethan shrugged. I read financial statements for a living. For who? Small companies mostly, people who can't afford the big firms. He picked up the last few papers and held them out to her. You've got somebody moving money through false acquisition accounts, probably someone with access to your transfer authorizations. If you trace the Clearwater deal back to the original signing authority, you'll find your problem. The woman took the papers slowly, like they might explode. Who are you? Oh, nobody. Ethan stood up, adjusting Maya in his arms. Just somebody trying to get his kid home. Wait. He was already moving toward the door. The doorman was watching them now, probably trying to decide if this was the kind of situation that required intervention. Ethan just wanted to disappear before it became one. I said, wait. The woman's voice had the kind of authority that made people stop walking. Ethan kept going. He had a daughter with a fever and medicine that was getting colder by the second and exactly zero interest in whatever corporate drama was unfolding behind him. He made it 3 steps. The hospital you're worried about, she called out. Mercy General, the one with the pediatric specialist program. Ethan stopped. Maya coughed again, and he felt it rattle through her whole small body. When he turned back around, the woman was standing there with her documents clutched against her chest like armor, and her expression was different now. Not calculating, something else. Something that might have been concern if it came from someone who looked like they remembered how. How did you eat? Your pharmacy bag, she said, nodding at the white paper crumpled in his hand. Mercy General is printed on the label, and you just identified a $2.8 million fraud in 3 seconds, which means you're either very good at what you do or very desperate. Based on the way you're holding your daughter, I'm guessing both. Ethan said nothing. The company running the Clearwater acquisition, she continued, is Hamilton Strategic Group. They're also the primary investor in the Mercy General expansion project, the same project that's currently funding your daughter's treatment program. The marble floor suddenly felt unstable. If Hamilton is stealing from me, the woman said, they're stealing from that hospital too, which means whatever your daughter needs, she might not get it. Not if they're draining funds the same way they've been draining mine. Maya's breathing was shallow against his neck. The fever was getting worse. He needed to move. Needed to get home. Needed to stop standing in this lobby with this woman who somehow knew too much and was offering him something that sounded like help but felt like a trap. I don't know you, Sita, Ethan said. Vivian Sinclair. She didn't offer her hand. CEO of Sinclair Digital Group. And I'm offering you a consulting contract, 2 weeks. Help me trace the fraud. Prove Hamilton is stealing. Get them removed from the hospital funding board before they can do any more damage. I can't. $50,000, Vivian said, plus full access to my legal team if Hamilton retaliates, plus a direct line to me if your daughter's treatment gets disrupted during the investigation. Ethan stared at her. $50,000. That was 6 months of rent, a year of medical bills. The kind of cushion that meant he could stop working doubles and actually be home when Maya woke up from nightmares. It was also insane. Why me? He asked. You could hire any forensic accountant in the city, because every forensic accountant in the city is connected to firms that are connected to people I can't trust right now. You're nobody. You said it yourself. Vivian's expression didn't change. That makes you either the safest option I have or the stupidest mistake I'll ever make. I'm choosing to believe it's the first one. Thunder rolled overhead. The lobby lights flickered once, then held. Maya's breathing was getting rougher. The medicine in Ethan's hand felt heavier than it should. He thought about the accident 3 years ago, about Sarah's funeral, about the night he'd sat in their empty bedroom and realized he had no idea how to be both parents. He thought about every double shift, every missed bedtime story, every morning Maya had woken up and asked when mommy was coming home. He thought about the mortgage on Sarah's medical debt, about the calls from collection agencies, about the specialist who'd told him last month that Maya's condition was manageable but required consistent treatment, and consistent treatment required consistent funding. And nothing about Ethan's life had been consistent since the day his wife died. "I need to get my daughter home," he said finally. Vivian pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and held it out. "Call me tomorrow. Or don't. But if you want to make sure Hamilton doesn't destroy that hospital program, you know where to find me." Ethan took the card. It was heavy paper, embossed lettering, the kind of thing that cost money to print. He shoved it in his pocket next to the pharmacy receipt and turned toward the door. "Mr. Cole?" He looked back one more time. "I'm not doing this to be kind," Vivian said quietly. "I'm doing this because I need someone who's good at finding things people are trying to hide. If that's you, then we can help each other. If it's not, then we're both wasting time." "Why do you assume it's me?" "Because you saw a $2.8 million problem in 3 seconds while holding a sick child in a rainstorm. That's not luck. That's skill. Plus," she paused, "and desperation, but mostly skill." Ethan didn't answer. He just pushed through the lobby doors back into the rain, holding Maya close, feeling the business card burning a hole in his pocket like a lit match. 3 days later, the apartment was quiet when Ethan's phone rang at 6 in the morning. He jerked awake on his couch where he'd fallen asleep reading case files, his laptop still open on his chest, Maya's breathing monitor beeping softly from her bedroom down the hall. The phone screen said unknown number. He almost ignored it. Then he remembered the business card he'd shoved in his jeans pocket and forgotten about until yesterday when he'd finally pulled it out and stared at it for 20 minutes. He answered, "Mr. Cole?" Vivian Sinclair's voice was crisp and awake in a way that made him hate morning people. "I need you in my office in 2 hours. I didn't say yes to your offer." "I know. But you didn't say no either, which means you're still thinking about it. And I just got confirmation that Hamilton's strategic is accelerating their timeline. If we don't move now, they'll have everything buried by the end of the week." Ethan sat up, running a hand through his hair. "What timeline?" "The board is voting Friday on whether to approve Hamilton's expanded role in the Mercy General funding structure. If they get approval, they'll have complete control over which programs get funded and which ones get cut. 3 guesses which category your daughter's treatment falls into." His stomach dropped. "They can't just bait the—" "They can, and they will, unless someone proves they're not a trustworthy financial partner." Vivian paused. "Someone like you." "I have a daughter to take care of." "Bring her." "What?" "To the office. I have a children's area on the executive floor. Toys, books, supervision. She'll be safe. You'll be close. And we can get started on pulling Hamilton's financial records before they have time to cover their tracks." Ethan looked down the hall toward Maya's room. Her fever had finally broken last night. She'd eaten half a waffle this morning and asked if she could go to school. He'd said yes because keeping her home meant missing another shift, and he'd already missed 2 this week. "I'm not bringing my daughter into some corporate war." "You're already into the corporate war," Vivian said flatly. "The question is whether you're going to fight back or let Hamilton win by default." The line went quiet. Ethan could hear traffic in the background on her end. Early morning Manhattan. The sound of people who woke up and went to offices where they made decisions that affected other people's lives without ever meeting them. 2 hours, Vivian said again. "If you're not here, I'll understand. But your daughter's treatment program will still be at risk, and you'll still be working doubles to pay for it. And Hamilton will still be stealing millions while people like you try to survive on what's left over." She hung up. Ethan sat there holding his phone, staring at the dark screen, listening to Maya's breathing monitor beep its steady rhythm down the hall, the same rhythm that had kept him sane for 3 years. The same rhythm that would stop if he couldn't afford the treatments, if the hospital program got cut, if Hamilton's strategic decided pediatric care wasn't profitable enough to fund. He thought about Sarah, about what she would do. But Sarah wasn't here. And he'd stopped asking himself that question 18 months ago when he realized she would have been better at all of this than he was. Now there was just him and Maya, and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. He stood up and walked down the hall to wake his daughter. The Sinclair Digital Group Tower looked like it was built to intimidate. 70 stories of steel and glass rising out of Midtown like a middle finger to every other building on the block. Ethan stood on the sidewalk holding Maya's hand, staring up at it, wondering what the hell he was doing. "It's tall," Maya said. "Yeah. Are we going to the top?" "Close to it." She squeezed his hand tighter. She'd been nervous all morning, picking at her breakfast, asking questions about where they were going, whether Daddy would stay with her, whether the people would be nice. He'd answered as honestly as he could without scaring her. "We're visiting Daddy's work friend. You'll have a place to play. I'll be right nearby." "Yes, the people will be nice." The last one might have been a lie. They pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that looked like it was carved from marble and ambition. Everything was white and gold and cold. A receptionist sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Ethan's car. She looked up as they approached, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw Maya. "Can I help you?" "Ethan Cole. I have the meeting with Ms. Sinclair." The receptionist's expression rearranged itself into something more genuine. "Of course, she's expecting you." She tapped something on her computer, then gestured toward the elevator bank. "Executive floor, someone will meet you when you arrive." The elevator was glass on 3 sides. Maya pressed her face against it as they rose, watching the lobby shrink below them. "Daddy? We're flying. Kind of. Will we fall?" "No, baby, we won't fall." The doors opened on the 68th floor into a space that didn't look like any office Ethan had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a waiting area with leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly salary. And standing near the windows, silhouetted against the morning light, was Vivian Sinclair. She turned when they stepped out. Her expression when she saw Maya was complicated. Surprise, maybe? Or something else Ethan couldn't read. "Mr. Cole." Miss Sinclair? This is your daughter?" "Maya." Ethan put a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Maya, this is Ms. Sinclair. She's the person I'm helping today." Maya did a small wave. "Hi." Vivian's expression softened in a way that looked unfamiliar on her face. "Hello, Maya. Do you like puzzles?" Maya nodded. "Good. I have a whole room full of them. Would you like to see?" She led them down a hallway past offices with closed doors and conference rooms with people already inside, working. At the end of the hall was a smaller room that looked like it had been designed by someone who actually understood children. Soft carpet, shelves full of toys and books, a table with puzzles and art supplies, windows with a view of the park. A young woman was already inside organizing something on one of the shelves. She looked up when they entered and smiled. "Hi, you must be Maya." Ethan tensed. "Who?" "Rachel," Vivian said. "She works in our family services division. Background checked, CPR certified, experience with children ages 4 to 10. She'll stay with Maya while we work." "Family services? We have 300 employees. Some of them have children. We accommodate." Vivian glanced at Rachel. "This is Mr. Cole. He'll be in my office if Maya needs anything." Rachel nodded. "We'll be fine. Won't we, Maya?" Maya looked up at Ethan with big eyes. He knelt down in front of her. "I'll be right down the hall, okay? If you need me, you tell Rachel and she'll come get me. I promise. Okay? You feel good? No fever?" "I'm okay, Daddy. He kissed her forehead and stood up, his chest tight. Leaving her with strangers went against every instinct he'd developed over the last 3 years. But Rachel seemed competent. The room was safe. And Maya was already moving toward the puzzle table with the kind of focus that meant she'd be fine for at least 20 minutes. "She'll be safe," Vivian said quietly behind him. Ethan didn't answer. He just followed her out of the room and down the hall toward whatever he'd just agreed to. Vivian's office was exactly what he expected. Massive windows, minimal furniture, a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone. What he didn't expect was the wall of monitors displaying live financial data, the stack of file boxes in the corner, or the second desk already set up with a computer and 3 external drives. "That's yours," Vivian said, gesturing at the setup. "Clean machine, isolated network access. Anything you find stays between us until we're ready to move." Ethan walked over to the desk and sat down. The chair was obscenely comfortable. "What exactly am I looking for?" "Proof that Hamilton Strategic is siphoning funds through false acquisition accounts. You already identified Clearwater. I need you to find the rest." She moved to her own desk and pulled up something on her screen. "I've got 8 months of transaction data loaded. Cross-referenced with our acquisition pipeline, board meeting minutes, and transfer authorizations. That's a lot of data. I'm paying you a lot of money." "Fair point." Ethan logged into the system and started pulling files. The interface was clean, better than most corporate systems he'd worked with. Within 5 minutes, he had 3 spreadsheets open and was running comparisons between reported acquisition costs and actual fund transfers. The discrepancies were worse than he'd thought. "You've got gaps in 6 different deals," he said after 20 minutes. "Total exposure is around 18 million. Vivian looked up sharply. 18E. "Rough estimate. I need to trace each one individually to confirm, but the pattern is consistent. Someone's approving acquisitions at inflated values, then transferring the difference into secondary accounts before the deals close. Can you trace where the money goes after that?" "Maybe. Depends on how well they covered their tracks." Ethan opened another file. "Who has signing authority on your acquisition transfers?" "Board-level executives only. Myself, our CFO, and 3 senior advisors. Names?" Vivian rattled them off. Ethan wrote them down and started cross-referencing them against the transaction logs. It took another 40 minutes, but eventually a pattern emerged. One name kept appearing as the secondary authorization on every suspicious transfer. "Marcus Hale," Ethan said. Vivian went very still. "What about him?" "He's the common thread. Every inflated acquisition, every suspicious transfer, his signature is on the authorization chain." Ethan turned the monitor so she could see. Either he's directly involved or someone's using his credentials without him knowing. Marcus has been with this company for 12 years. Then either he's very good at hiding it or he's being set up. Vivian stood up and walked to the windows, her arms crossed. The morning light made her look younger somehow, more uncertain. "Marcus is the one who recommended Hamilton Strategic as a partner. He brought them to the board, vouched for their reputation. That doesn't look good for him." "No." She was quiet for a long moment. "It doesn't." Ethan waited. He'd learned over the years that people needed time to process bad news, especially when it came from someone they trusted. He'd seen it in his own work, small business owners finding out their bookkeeper was stealing, partners discovering their co-founder was cooking the books. The betrayal always hit harder than the money. "Can you prove it?" Vivian asked finally. "I can prove the transfers are happening. Proving Marcus authorized them requires access to system logs showing who actually executed the transactions. That's deeper than what I've got here. I can get you those logs. You sure you want to?" She turned back to face him. "If Marcus is stealing from me, I want to know. If he's being framed, I want to know that too. Either way, we need proof before Friday's board vote. That's 3 days." "I'm aware." Ethan looked back at his screen. 3 days to trace $18 million through what was probably a deliberately complicated system designed to hide exactly this kind of fraud. 3 days to prove a senior executive was either a thief or a victim. 3 days to make sure Maya's hospital program didn't get gutted by people who cared more about profit margins than pediatric care. "I'll need complete access to your financial systems," he said. "No restrictions. And if I find something that implicates other people, I need to know you'll act on it." "You have my word?" "I need more than your word. I need it in writing, contract, legal protection, the whole thing." Vivian pulled out her phone and made a call. "Thomas, I need a consulting contract drafted in the next 2 hours. Full confidentiality, full indemnity, $50,000 fee." She paused. "Because I'm asking you to. Thank you." She hung up and looked at Ethan. "Anything else?" Yeah, if this goes sideways and Hamilton retaliates, I need to know my daughter's treatment won't be affected. You have my personal guarantee. What's that worth if they have the board votes? Vivian's expression hardened. Then I'll make sure they don't have the votes. By lunch, Ethan had traced 4 of the 6 suspicious acquisitions to accounts controlled by shell companies registered in Delaware. The 5th was buried in a mess of international transfers that would take days to untangle. The 6th had been deleted from the system entirely, or at least someone had tried to delete it. I need your IT department, Ethan said, not looking up from his screen. Why? Someone tried to erase the Meridian Tech acquisition from your records. They did a sloppy job. I can see the ghost data, but I need someone who can pull the original files from your backup servers. Vivian made another call. 20 minutes later, a nervous-looking man in his 30s appeared in the office doorway. This is Kevin, Vivian said, head of IT security. Kevin, this is Ethan Cole. Give him whatever he needs. Kevin looked between them uncertainly. Ms. Sinclair, accessing deleted financial records requires… I know what it requires. Do it anyway. But if someone finds out, they won't. Not if you do your job correctly. Kevin swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, ma'am. He spent the next hour at Ethan's desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard, muttering to himself about server protocols and backup rotations. Eventually, he sat back with a satisfied grunt. Got it. The original Meridian files were deleted 2 weeks ago, but I pulled them from the monthly backup archive. Can you tell who deleted them? Ethan asked. Kevin pulled up another screen. System shows the deletion was authorized by… Oh. What? Marcus Hale's account. But the deletion happened at 2:30 in the morning, which is weird because Marcus usually logs off by 6 p.m. Ethan and Vivian exchanged a look. Can you tell where the login originated? Vivian asked. Kevin typed something else. Remote access, from an IP address registered to Hamilton Strategic Group. The room went very quiet. Send me everything you just found, Vivian said. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now, something sharp. And Kevin? This conversation didn't happen. Yes, ma'am. Kevin practically ran out of the office. Ethan turned back to his screen and opened the recovered Meridian files. The acquisition had been marked at $42 million. The actual transfer amount was $38 million, $4 million missing. And according to the authorization chain, Marcus Hale had approved both the inflated purchase price and the transfer to a secondary account registered to a company called Westfield Holdings. Westfield is owned by Hamilton, Vivian said quietly. She was reading over his shoulder. They use it for private investments. So Hamilton inflates the acquisition price, Marcus approves it, the extra money goes to Westfield, and Hamilton pockets the difference. Ethan pulled up the other files he'd traced, and they've been doing it for at least 8 months. $18 million. Probably more. That's just what I can prove so far. Vivian walked back to the windows and stood there for a long time. Outside, the city stretched out in every direction. Thousands of buildings, millions of people, all of them living lives that didn't include corporate fraud or stolen money or sick children who needed hospital programs that might not exist next month. I trusted him, she said finally. Ethan didn't know if she meant Marcus or Hamilton, maybe both. People make mistakes, he offered. This isn't a mistake, this is theft. Yeah, it is. She turned back to face him. Can you testify? About what? What you found. If we take this to the board, can you stand up in front of them and explain how Hamilton has been stealing from us? Ethan thought about standing in a room full of executives and lawyers, explaining forensic accounting to people who would be looking for any reason to discredit him. Thought about Hamilton's attorneys asking questions about his credentials, his background, his dead wife, his sick daughter. Thought about Maya waiting down the hall in a room full of puzzles, trusting him to keep her safe. Yeah, he said. I can testify. Even if it puts you at risk? I'm already at risk. We both are. He gestured at the screen. You think Hamilton is going to let this go quietly? The second they realize we know, they're going to come after both of us. I have lawyers. And I have a 6-year-old who needs medical care from a hospital they control. So yeah, I'll testify. But if they retaliate against Maya's treatment, I'm going to need more than lawyers. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone again and made another call. David, I need you to draft an emergency motion for tomorrow's board meeting. I'm removing Hamilton Strategic from the Mercy General Funding Board, effective immediately. She listened. I don't care if it's irregular. I'm invoking my emergency powers as CEO. Have the paperwork ready by 5 p.m. She hung up and looked at Ethan. If the board approves, Hamilton will be removed from the hospital funding structure before Friday's vote. Your daughter's treatment won't be affected. Can you get it approved? I can try. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was better than nothing. Ethan turned back to his computer and kept working. That's by my sake. At 3 o'clock, Vivian's assistant knocked on the door. Miss Sinclair, the contracts are ready. Vivian took the folder and brought it to Ethan's desk. Inside was a consulting agreement, printed on heavy paper, outlining everything they'd discussed. $50,000, 2 weeks of work, full legal protection, confidentiality guarantees. At the bottom was a line for his signature. Read it first, Vivian said. Make sure it says what you need it to say. Ethan read it, twice. It was exactly what she'd promised. No hidden clauses, no corporate doublespeak, just a straightforward agreement that treated him like someone whose work had value. He signed it. Vivian signed below him, then handed the folder back to her assistant. File this immediately. When they were alone again, she sat down in the chair across from his desk, not behind her own desk, not standing by the windows, but right there like they were equals having a conversation. Thank you, she said. For what? For not walking away. 3 nights ago in the lobby, you could have left. You should have left. You had every reason to. You gave me a bigger reason to stay. Money. Security, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. Vivian studied him for a moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone desperate enough to take a risk this stupid. You're desperate, but you're not stupid. She paused. Your wife, how did she die? The question hit him sideways. Most people didn't ask directly. They danced around it, offered condolences, changed the subject. Vivian just asked. Car accident, Ethan said. 3 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Is that why you're so good at finding hidden problems? Because you've spent 3 years trying to find something you can actually fix? Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. At the expensive suit and the perfect posture and the eyes that were asking a question she probably didn't realize she was asking. Maybe, he said. Or maybe I just got good at numbers because they're easier than people. Numbers lie too. Yeah, but they leave evidence when they do. Vivian almost smiled. Almost. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment broke. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted back to business. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m., she said, standing. I need you to have a full report ready by 9. Everything we've found, everything we can prove. Names, dates, dollar amounts. That's not much time. I know, but if we wait any longer, Hamilton will know we're coming. She was right. And Ethan had learned a long time ago that sometimes you had to move fast, even when you weren't ready. I'll have it done, he said. Vivian nodded and started toward the door. Then she stopped and looked back. How's your daughter? Good, I think. She's been quiet. Rachel says she's been doing puzzles. Finished 6 of them. Eesh. Vivian paused. She asked if you were okay. Rachel didn't know what to tell her. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. I'll go check on her. Take your time. We've got all night if we need it. But when he walked down the hall to the children's room, Maya was curled up on one of the soft chairs, fast asleep, a half-finished puzzle on the table in front of her. Rachel looked up when he entered and smiled. She said she was tired about an hour ago. I told her she could rest. Thank you. Ethan knelt down next to Maya and brushed hair away from her forehead. No fever. Her breathing was steady. She looked peaceful in a way she hadn't looked in weeks. He stayed there for a long time, just watching her sleep, thinking about the numbers waiting for him down the hall and the men who had been stealing millions while children like his daughter fought to survive. When he finally stood up, his jaw was set and his hands were steady. He walked back to Vivian's office and got to work. The report took Ethan until 4 in the morning to finish. He sat in Vivian's office with cold coffee and spreadsheets that blurred together after midnight, tracing every dollar Hamilton Strategic had stolen through acquisition accounts that shouldn't have existed. 18 million confirmed, another 6 million probable but harder to prove, $24 million siphoned out of Sinclair Digital over 8 months while Marcus Hale signed authorizations from IP addresses that weren't his. Maya had woken up twice during the night. Both times, Ethan had carried her from the children's room to a small couch Vivian kept near the windows, letting her sleep against his shoulder while he worked one-handed. The second time, Vivian had appeared in the doorway around 2 a.m. with blankets she'd pulled from somewhere, draping one over Maya without saying anything, then disappearing back to her own desk where she'd been making calls to lawyers who apparently didn't sleep. Now the sun was starting to rise over Manhattan, painting the office in shades of gold and gray, and Ethan was staring at a 70-page document that would either save Maya's hospital program or destroy what was left of his quiet life. "It's finished," he said. Vivian looked up from her laptop. She'd taken off her jacket sometime around midnight. Her hair had come loose from whatever tight arrangement she usually kept it in. She looked exhausted and angry, and more human than she had any right to look after staying up all night preparing for corporate war. "Send it to me," she said. Ethan hit send and watched the file transfer. Vivian opened it on her screen and started reading, her expression unreadable. He waited. His eyes burned. His back hurt. Maya was still asleep on the couch, her breathing soft and steady, and all he wanted was to take her home and pretend the last 24 hours hadn't happened. But they had happened, and there was no going back now. "This is solid work," Vivian said finally. She scrolled through another page. "You traced the Westfield Holdings connections all the way to Hamilton's offshore accounts?" "Took most of the night, but yeah, they weren't expecting anyone to look that deep. And you can prove Marcus's login credentials were compromised?" Kevin pulled the server logs. Every suspicious transaction came from an IP address registered to Hamilton's corporate network. Marcus's actual workstation never touched any of it. Vivian sat back in her chair. "So Marcus was set up. Looks like it. Hamilton needed someone with signing authority. Marcus was the easiest target because he'd already brought them in as partners. Made him look complicit. He's going to be devastated. Better devastated than arrested. He's going to be devastated." Vivian almost smiled at that. Almost. Then her phone buzzed and the moment passed. She glanced at the screen and her jaw tightened. "The board meeting starts in 5 hours. I need to brief my legal team and make sure we have enough votes to remove Hamilton before they can mount a defense." "You think you have the votes?" "I think I have 4 definite supporters and 3 people who'll vote whichever way protects their own interests. Marcus makes 5 if he's willing to stand with me after finding out he's been used." She paused. "That leaves 2 votes I can't predict. What happens if you lose?" "Hamilton stays on the Mercy General Funding Board. They get approval to expand their financial oversight role. And everyone who depends on that hospital, including your daughter, gets caught in whatever they decide is profitable enough to fund." Ethan looked over at Maya sleeping on the couch, 6 years old, still small enough to carry, still young enough to believe her father could protect her from everything. "We can't lose," he said quietly. "Then we won't." Vivian said it with the kind of certainty that came from years of making decisions and living with the consequences. Ethan wanted to believe her. But he'd spent 3 years learning that certainty didn't mean much when the world decided to go sideways. His phone buzzed, a text from Maya's school asking if she'd be absent today. He typed back a quick yes and shoved the phone in his pocket. Another day missed. Another explanation he'd have to give to her teacher about why they couldn't maintain a normal schedule. Another reminder that nothing about their life was normal and probably never would be again. "You should take her home," Vivian said. She'd been watching him. "Get some sleep. I'll call you before the meeting. I want to be there." "You don't need to be there. I've got your report. That's enough." "It's not enough." Ethan stood up and walked to the windows. The city was waking up below them, cars and people and lives that didn't include corporate fraud or stolen millions. Hamilton is going to question everything in that report. They're going to say I'm not qualified, that I made mistakes, that you hired some desperate nobody because you couldn't find real evidence. If I'm not there to defend the work, they'll tear it apart. I have lawyers who can defend it. Lawyers didn't find the fraud, I did. And if this goes to a vote, the board needs to see the person who traced every dollar, not just read about it in a report. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, but Maya can't be in the boardroom. I know. Rachel can stay with her. Same room as yesterday. Same setup. For how long? However long it takes. Vivian closed her laptop and stood up. Board meetings don't have time limits. Could be 2 hours. Could be 6. You need to be prepared for that. Ethan thought about Maya waking up and asking where he was. Thought about her sitting in that room doing puzzles while he sat in a boardroom full of executives deciding whether to believe him. Thought about what Sarah would say if she could see him now, bringing their daughter into a building full of strangers, risking their financial security on a 2-week contract, gambling everything on the hope that rich people might choose to do the right thing. Sarah would have told him he was crazy. Sarah also would have done exactly the same thing. I'll be ready, he said. Sam. They went home at 6 a.m. Ethan carried Maya down to the lobby where a car was waiting. Not a taxi, but one of those black sedans with drivers who wore suits and didn't ask questions. Vivian had arranged it. She'd also arranged for breakfast to be waiting at his apartment when they arrived, though Ethan had no idea how she'd managed that. Maya woke up during the drive and looked around confused. Are we going home? Yeah, baby, we're going home. Is Miss Sinclair coming? No, she has work to do. She's nice. Ethan glanced out the window at the city passing by. Yeah, she is. Are you helping her? I'm trying to. That's good. Maya yawned and settled back against him. Mommy always said we should help people when we can. Something twisted in Ethan's chest. He kissed the top of her head and didn't trust himself to answer. When they got to the apartment, there was indeed breakfast waiting, bagels and fruit and orange juice in containers that looked like they'd come from one of those places where breakfast cost $20. Ethan fed Maya, got her changed into clean clothes, and tried not to think about the fact that he had 3 hours to shower and prepare for a board meeting that could determine whether his daughter's medical treatment continued or disappeared. He was in the shower when his phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again and again. When he finally got out and checked, there were 6 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize and 1 voicemail. He played it while getting dressed. Mr. Cole, this is David Chen from Hamilton Strategic Group. I understand you've been conducting an investigation into our business relationship with Sinclair Digital. I'd like to invite you to meet with our legal team this morning before the board meeting to discuss your findings. We believe there may be some misunderstandings that could be easily resolved. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. The voice was smooth, professional, the kind of tone that made threats sound like favors. Ethan deleted the message and called Vivian. She answered on the first ring. What's wrong? Hamilton just called me. They want to meet before the board session. What did you tell them? Well, nothing. I didn't answer. Oh. Good. Don't. He heard her moving, talking to someone in the background. They're fishing. They know we found something, but they don't know how much. If you meet with them, they'll try to find out what you can prove and what you're guessing at. So I just ignore them? You ignore them. Let me handle Hamilton. You focus on being ready to present your findings in 2.5 hours. Ethan finished getting dressed and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like exactly what he was. A guy who'd been up all night, who owned 1 decent suit, who was about to walk into a room full of people who made more in a month than he'd make in 5 years. Hamilton's lawyers were going to eat him alive. Ethan, Vivian's voice pulled him back. You still there? Yeah, eat. You're going to be fine. You know the numbers better than anyone in that room. Just tell them what you found and let the evidence speak for itself. What if they don't believe me? Then we make them believe you. She paused. I'll see you at 9:30. Don't be late. She hung up. Ethan stood there holding his phone, staring at his reflection, trying to convince himself that everything Vivian had just said was true, that he'd be fine, that the evidence would speak for itself, that a board of executives would take the word of a single father who repaired financial systems for small companies over a multi-million-dollar investment firm with lawyers and political connections. He was still trying to convince himself when Maya appeared in the doorway wearing her favorite yellow dress. "Daddy, I'm ready." "Ready for what, baby?" "To go back to Ms. Sinclair's building. You said we're going back today." Ethan knelt down and fixed the collar on her dress. "We are. But this time, Daddy has to be in a meeting, a grown-up meeting. You'll stay with Rachel again."
"Will it take a long time?" "It might. Will you be okay?"
The question caught him off guard. He looked at his daughter's serious face and saw Sarah looking back at him. The same concern, the same way of cutting through everything else to ask the question that actually mattered. "Yeah," he said. "I'll be okay. Promise?" "Promise." Maya hugged him tight. Ethan closed his eyes and held her, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her small body pressed against him, thinking about all the promises he'd made over the last 3 years, and all the ones he'd managed to keep. This one had to be another keeper. The Sinclair Digital boardroom was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, a table that could seat 30 people, walls lined with portraits of previous company leaders who all looked like they'd built empires and crushed competitors before breakfast. Ethan stood near the door at 9:40, wearing his one good suit and carrying a tablet with his report loaded, watching executives file in and take their seats like they were assembling for battle. Vivian sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. To her right was a man in his 50s who Ethan recognized from the files as Thomas Wright, Sinclair Digital's CFO. To her left was an empty seat that probably belonged to Marcus Hale, though Marcus hadn't arrived yet. Down the table sat representatives from Hamilton Strategic, 2 lawyers in expensive suits, and a man Ethan assumed was David Chen based on the voice from the voicemail. Chen was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 35, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having to worry about money. "Mr. Cole?" Vivian gestured to a chair near her end of the table. "Please join us." Ethan walked over and sat down. Every eye in the room followed him. He could feel them calculating, measuring, deciding whether he was a threat or a distraction. Chen was staring at him with particular intensity, like he was trying to figure out where Ethan fit in the equation. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Vivian began. She looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze. "I've called this emergency session because evidence has come to light suggesting financial irregularities in our partnership with Hamilton Strategic Group. Mr. Cole has prepared a detailed analysis which I believe warrants immediate board review." "With respect, Ms. Sinclair," Chen said smoothly, "Hamilton Strategic has been a trusted partner of this company for over a year. Any allegations of impropriety should be investigated through proper channels, not rushed to a board meeting based on the work of an outside consultant we know nothing about." "Mr. Cole is a forensic financial analyst with 8 years of experience identifying corporate fraud," Vivian said. "His credentials are sound." "I'm sure they are, but credentials aren't the same as impartiality. Has anyone verified that Mr. Cole doesn't have a personal interest in discrediting Hamilton Strategic?" All eyes turned to Ethan. He thought about lying, about keeping Maya out of this, but Vivian had told him the evidence would speak for itself, and part of that evidence was his motivation for looking in the first place. "My daughter receives treatment through Mercy General's Pediatric Specialist Program," Ethan said. "Hamilton Strategic sits on the funding board, so yeah, I have a personal interest, but that doesn't change the numbers." "It changes your objectivity," Chen replied. "Numbers don't care about objectivity. They're either accurate or they're not. Then perhaps you should present these numbers and let the board decide." Vivian nodded at Ethan. "Go ahead." Ethan stood up and connected his tablet to the room's display system. The first slide appeared on the wall-mounted screen, a summary of the 6 suspicious acquisitions he'd traced. "Over the last 8 months," Ethan began, "Sinclair Digital has completed 6 major acquisitions with a combined reported value of $142 million. But the actual transferred funds total only $118 million. That's a gap of $24 million. He clicked to the next slide showing the transaction logs. The missing funds were redirected to secondary accounts before the acquisitions closed. Those accounts are controlled by Westfield Holdings, a shell company owned by Hamilton Strategic Group. Chen leaned back in his chair. Westfield Holdings is a legitimate investment vehicle. We use it for dozens of transactions. I'm sure you do. But in these specific cases, the funds transferred to Westfield never reached the acquisition targets. They disappeared into offshore accounts registered in the Cayman Islands. Ethan pulled up the next slide showing the offshore transfers. I traced each one. They all lead back to Hamilton Strategic. The room went quiet. This is speculation, Chen said. Room went. But his voice had lost some of its smoothness. Offshore accounts are common in international business. You can't prove... I can prove the acquisition values were deliberately inflated, Ethan interrupted. He pulled up the Meridian Tech file. Take Meridian Tech. Sinclair Digital paid $42 million for a company whose actual market value was $38 million. The $4 million difference went to Westfield Holdings on the same day the acquisition closed. Market valuations are subjective, not when you compare them to the seller's own financial statements. Meridian Tech reported $38 million in net assets. There was no justification for a $42 million purchase price except to create a gap large enough to hide the theft. Ethan clicked through 3 more examples, each showing the same pattern: inflated purchase prices, transfers to Westfield Holdings, offshore accounts receiving the difference. By the time he finished, several board members were leaning forward, studying the numbers on the screen. The total confirmed theft is $18 million, Ethan concluded, with another $6 million probable pending further investigation, all authorized through signing credentials belonging to Marcus Hale, though system logs show the transactions originated from IP addresses registered to Hamilton Strategic's corporate network.
That's impossible, someone said from down the table. Marcus would never... The boardroom door opened and Marcus Hale walked in.
He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He walked to his seat next to Vivian and sat down heavily, not looking at anyone. "Marcus," Vivian said quietly, "are you—" "I didn't know—" His voice was rough. "I swear I didn't know what they were doing." Chen stood up abruptly. "This is highly irregular. We should postpone this meeting until everyone has had time to review the allegations properly." "That's the—" "Sit down, David." Vivian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You're going to listen to what Marcus has to say." Chen remained standing for a moment, then slowly lowered himself back into his chair. Marcus looked around the table. "Hamilton came to me 18 months ago with a proposal to help Sinclair Digital expand through strategic acquisitions. They had experience, connections, capital. I thought they were the right partners." He paused. "I didn't know they were stealing from us. I didn't know they were using my login credentials to authorize transfers. I didn't know any of it until Ms. Sinclair called me at 6 this morning and told me to check my system access logs." "And what did those logs show?" Vivian asked. "That someone's been accessing my account remotely for the last 8 months. Every suspicious transaction, mister. Cole identified came from an IP address I've never used." Marcus turned to look at Chen. "Your IP address, David. Your office network. Your computer." "This is absurd," Chen said, but there was an edge to his voice now. "Anyone could have spoofed those IP addresses, not without access to Hamilton's internal network," Ethan said. He pulled up the final slide showing the server logs. "The access points require VPN authentication, which means whoever executed these transactions wasn't just using Hamilton's network, they were logged in as authorized Hamilton employees." Chen's jaw tightened. "I want to see those logs verified by an independent forensic team." "You're welcome to request verification," Vivian said, "but this board is voting today on whether to remove Hamilton Strategic from our partnership agreements, including your position on the Mercy General Funding Board. You can't do that without a full investigation." "I can, and I will. We have sufficient evidence to warrant immediate action." Vivian looked around the table. "All in favor of removing Hamilton Strategic Group from all partnership agreements with Sinclair Digital, effective immediately, raise your hand." 4 hands went up instantly. Vivian, Marcus, Thomas Wright, and a woman Ethan didn't recognize. A 5th hand rose after a moment's hesitation, then a 6th. Chen stood up again. "This is a mistake. Hamilton Strategic has significant legal recourse." "Then use it," Vivian said calmly. "But you're doing it from outside this company." "And outside the Mercy General Funding Board. Security will escort you out." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as if they'd been waiting. Chen looked at them, then at Vivian, then at the board members who'd voted against him. His expression shifted from confident to calculating to something that might have been rage. "You have no idea what you've just done," he said quietly. "I know exactly what I've done," Vivian replied. "I've protected this company from theft. Now leave before I have you arrested." Chen gathered his papers and walked toward the door, his lawyers following. As he passed Ethan's chair, he stopped. "This isn't over," he said, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," Ethan said. Chen stared at him for a moment, then walked out. The boardroom door closed, and the room exhaled collectively. Marcus put his head in his hands. Thomas Wright was already on his phone, probably calling their legal department. Vivian sat very still, her expression unreadable. "That went well?" someone said from down the table. "It went necessary," Vivian corrected. She looked at Ethan. "Thank you for your work, Mr. Cole. The board will review your full report and determine next steps regarding legal action against Hamilton Strategic." It was a dismissal, polite but clear. Ethan gathered his tablet and stood up. "Ms. Sinclair, before you go..." Marcus looked up, his face haggard. "I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have noticed. You were set up, Marcus. No one's blaming you." Vivian's voice was gentler than Ethan had heard it before. "But we need to review all of your authorizations from the last year. Make sure there's nothing else we missed." Marcus nodded. "Whatever you need." Ethan left the boardroom and walked down the hall toward the children's room where Maya was waiting. His hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline crash, probably. He'd just accused a multi-million-dollar company of theft in front of a board of executives. Chen's threat echoed in his head. This isn't over. He knew it wasn't. But for now, Maya's hospital program was safe. Hamilton was off the funding board, and Ethan had $50,000 coming that would cover rent and medical bills for months. It should have felt like winning. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something much bigger and much worse than he'd expected. Check. Maya was building a tower out of blocks when he walked into the children's room. She looked up and smiled. "Daddy, you're back." "Hey, baby." He knelt down and pulled her into a hug. "How was playing?" "Good. Rachel helped me build this. It's a castle. It's a great castle." Rachel stood up from where she'd been sitting nearby. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, we're done here." Ethan looked at Maya. "Ready to go home? Can we come back tomorrow?" "Probably not tomorrow. But I like it here." "Oh." Ethan glanced at Rachel, who smiled sympathetically. "You're welcome any time, Maya. Ms. Sinclair said so." They gathered Maya's things and headed toward the elevator. Ethan was halfway there when Vivian appeared in the hallway. "Mr. Cole, a moment?" He told Maya to wait by the elevator with Rachel, then walked back to where Vivian stood. "You did good work in there," she said quietly. "Better than most consultants I've hired." "Thanks. I mean it. You could have a real career doing this if you wanted. Corporate forensics, fraud investigation. There's demand and you're clearly talented. I've got a daughter to raise. Plenty of people raise children and have careers. Not single parents working doubles to pay medical bills." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "The hospital funding is secure now. Hamilton's off the board. Your daughter's treatment won't be affected." "Because you removed them. What happens when they fight back?" "They will fight back. But we've got evidence and board approval. We'll win. And if they don't fight fair, then neither will I." Vivian held his gaze. "You're worried about retaliation." "Chen threatened me on his way out. Said I had no idea who I was dealing with." "Yes, Chen is angry and embarrassed. He'll calm down once his lawyers explain that fighting this publicly will expose everything Hamilton's been doing." She paused. "But if you're concerned about safety, I can arrange security." "I don't need security. I need Hamilton to stay away from my daughter's hospital and my life." They will. The board vote was unanimous. Hamilton's partnership agreements are terminated. They have no leverage left. Weets. Ethan wanted to believe her, but he'd spent 3 years learning that bad things happened even when you did everything right. And there was nothing he could do to stop them except keep moving and hope you were fast enough.
Your contract is for 2 weeks, Vivian continued. Today was day 1. If you're willing, I'd like you to continue investigating Hamilton's other business relationships.
Make sure they haven't done this to anyone else. If we can build a broader case, it strengthens our position and protects the hospital funding long term.
That sounds like more than 2 weeks of work.
Then we'll extend the contract. Same rate, same protections. What? Ethan looked down this hall where Maya was showing Rachel something on her tablet. 6 years old, laughing, healthy, safe. Everything he'd been fighting for since Sarah died. I'll think about it, he said.
Take your time, but Ethan... Vivian's expression shifted slightly. You're good at this. Better than you probably realize. Don't let fear stop you from using that.
She walked away before he could answer. Ethan stood there for a moment, then went to collect his daughter and take her home. The apartment felt too quiet after the chaos of Sinclair Digital's offices. Ethan made lunch while Maya told him about the puzzles she'd completed and the books Rachel had read to her. He listened with half his attention while the other half replayed the board meeting. Chen's threats, Marcus's devastation, Vivian's certainty that everything would be fine. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake today. Hamilton Strategic doesn't forget. Ethan stared at the message, his jaw tight. Then he blocked the number and set his phone face down on the counter. Daddy? Maya was looking at him. Are you okay? Yeah, baby. I'm fine.
You look worried. Just tired. From the grown-up meeting? From the grown-up meeting? Maya climbed down from her chair and came over to hug his leg. It's okay, Daddy. Mommy says grown-up stuff is hard sometimes. Ethan froze. What?
Mommy. She talks to me sometimes when I'm sleeping. She says you're doing a good job and it's okay if things are hard. Something caught in Ethan's throat. He picked Maya up and held her close, caught in breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her small arms around his neck. Yeah, he said quietly. It's hard sometimes, but we're okay. I know, because you're my daddy, Young. She said it with complete confidence, like it was the simplest truth in the world, like having a father who was tired and scared and making things up as he went along was enough, because he was there and he was trying. Ethan closed his eyes and held his daughter and tried to believe she was right. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Last warning. Walk away while you still can. He blocked that number too. Then he carried Maya to the couch and put on her favorite movie and tried not to think about what happened to people who didn't listen to warnings. The threats stopped for 3 days. Ethan almost convinced himself they'd been empty bluster, Chen lashing out before his lawyers muzzled him. He went back to his regular work, fixing spreadsheets for small businesses that paid in installments, picking Maya up from school, making dinner, pretending everything was normal. The $50,000 from Vivian's contract sat in his bank account, like a safety net he didn't quite trust yet. On the 4th day, Maya's school called. Mr. Cole, this is Principal Stevens. I'm calling because there was an incident today during pickup. Ethan's stomach dropped. He was in the middle of debugging a payroll system for a restaurant owner who couldn't afford to miss Friday's direct deposits. What kind of incident? A man approached Maya outside the main entrance, said he was a friend of yours and offered to give her a ride home. The world tilted sideways. What did Maya do? She remembered what you taught her. She said no and ran back inside to find her teacher. The man left immediately. Principal Stevens paused. Mr. Cole, do you know who this person was? No. Ethan was already grabbing his keys. Is Maya okay? She's fine. A little shaken, but fine. She's in my office now. I'm on my way. Don't let her leave the building. Don't let anyone near her, except staff you personally know. We won't. But, Mr. Cole, I need to ask, is there something going on we should be aware of? A custody situation, maybe, or no custody situation. Just keep her safe. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He made it in 8, running 2 red lights and parking illegally in front of the school. Maya was sitting in the principal's office with a juice box and red eyes that said she'd been crying. When she saw him, she launched herself across the room. Daddy? Ethan caught her and held on tight, his heart hammering. Hey, baby, you're okay. I've got you. There was a man. He said he knew you. I know, Principal Stevens told me. You did exactly the right thing. Maya pulled back to look at him. He said you sent him to pick me up.
But you always pick me up yourself. That's right. I always pick you up myself. Always.
Ethan looked at Principal Stevens. Did anyone get a description, license plate, anything? One of our teachers saw him from the window. White male, mid-30s, dark suit. He was driving a black sedan, but she didn't catch the plate. Principal Stevens folded her hands on her desk. Mr. Cole, I really need to know if there's a threat here. If there is, we need to involve the police. What? Ethan thought about the blocked numbers. The threats. Chen's voice saying you have no idea who you're dealing with. He thought about explaining corporate fraud and stolen millions to a principal who just wanted to keep kids safe during carpool. I'll handle it, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got right now. Ethan stood up with Maya in his arms. But I promise you, nobody's getting near her again. I'll pick her up myself every day, early if I have to. And if anyone else approaches her, you call me immediately, and then you call the police. Principal Stevens didn't look satisfied, but she nodded. We'll be watching. Ethan carried Maya out to the car and strapped her into her booster seat. His hands were shaking. Maya noticed. Daddy, are you scared? A little bit, yeah. Is the man going to come back? Not if I can help it. What if he does? Ethan knelt down next to her seat so they were eye level. Then you do exactly what you did today. You say no, you run to a teacher, and you stay inside until I get there. Can you remember that? I can remember. Good girl. He kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you, Maya. You were so brave. Mommy says being brave is just being scared, but doing the right thing anyway. There it was again. Maya talking about Sarah like she was still around, still giving advice. Ethan's therapist had said it was normal, that kids processed grief differently, that imaginary conversations with lost parents were a coping mechanism. But every time Maya mentioned it, Ethan felt like he was failing at something fundamental. Mommy's right, he said quietly. He drove home checking his mirrors every 30 seconds, watching for black sedans, taking random turns to make sure nobody was following them. By the time they reached the apartment, Maya had fallen asleep in her booster seat and Ethan's jaw ached from clenching it. He carried her inside and locked every lock on the door. Deadbolt, chain, the little sliding one he'd installed last year after a break-in 2 floors down. Then he laid Maya on the couch, grabbed his phone, and called Vivian. She answered on the second ring. Ethan, is everything... Someone tried to grab Maya from school today. Silence. Then, are you sure? A man approached her during pickup, told her I'd send him to give her a ride. She's 6 years old, Vivian. She's 6 and Hamilton sent someone to her school. Mas, where are you now? Home. Door's locked. But I can't... His voice cracked. I can't protect her from this. I don't know how to protect her from people with money and lawyers and enough reach to find her school. You're going to stay there and keep the doors locked. I'm sending security to watch your building. They'll be there in 20 minutes. I don't want security. I want Hamilton to leave my daughter alone. And they will. But first we need to make sure you're both safe. Vivian's voice had shifted into the mode he recognized from the boardroom. Decisive, controlled, already solving the problem. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days. I'm sending a car at 7 a.m. tomorrow to bring you both to my apartment. What? You can't stay in your apartment if Hamilton knows where you live. And they clearly know where you live. She paused. My place has security, doorman, cameras. It's safe. You and Maya can stay there until we figure out how to handle this. I'm not moving into your apartment. You're not moving in. You're staying temporarily while my lawyers get a restraining order filed against Hamilton and everyone connected to them. It's a practical solution to an immediate problem. Ethan looked over at Maya sleeping on the couch, small and trusting and completely unaware that her father had dragged her into a war with people who had no problem using children as leverage. This is my fault, he said quietly. This is Hamilton's fault. You just exposed them for it. Vivian's tone softened slightly. Ethan, you didn't do anything wrong. You found fraud. You reported it. Hamilton is the one escalating to threats and intimidation. That's on them, not you. Tell that to Maya when she asks why she can't go to school. She can go to school, just not alone, and not until we have legal protections in place. Vivian paused. 7 a.m. tomorrow. Pack light. Bring Maya's medications and whatever she needs to feel comfortable in a strange place. The car will be a black SUV with a driver named Marcus. Different Marcus, not our CFO. He'll have ID. Don't get in any other vehicle. You've done this before. I've dealt with corporate retaliation before, yes. Usually it's journalists or whistleblowers. Sometimes it's consultants who found things people wanted to stay hidden. It's always ugly. But it's manageable if you move fast and don't give them time to escalate further. Ethan rubbed his eyes. He felt exhausted down to his bones. Not the regular tired from single parenting and double shifts, but something deeper. The kind of exhaustion that came from realizing you'd walked into something much bigger than you'd understood, and there was no easy way out. Okay, he said finally. 7 a.m. Good. And Ethan, don't open the door for anyone until security arrives. Not delivery drivers, not neighbors, not anyone. She hung up. Ethan sat there holding his phone, listening to Maya's soft breathing, trying to figure out how he was going to explain this to a 6-year-old who just wanted to do puzzles and go to school and believe her father could keep her safe from everything. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Ethan looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in suits with security badges clipped to their belts. One of them held up an ID card to the peephole. Mr. Cole, we're from Sentinel Security Services. Ms. Sinclair sent us. Ethan opened the door halfway, keeping the chain on. Let me see that ID again. The man passed it through the gap. It looked legitimate. Photo, company logo, a holographic seal that caught the light. Ethan took a picture of it with his phone and texted it to Vivian. Her reply came back in seconds. That's them. You're safe. He opened the door. The 2 men stepped inside and immediately began checking windows and sightlines like they'd done this 1,000 times. The one who'd shown his ID turned back to Ethan. I'm Richards. This is Torres. We'll be posted outside your door tonight. Tomorrow morning at 7, Marcus will pick you up. Until then, you stay inside and we make sure nobody gets close. How long do you usually do this kind of thing? Depends on the threat level. Usually a few days until legal protections kick in. Richards glanced at Maya, asleep on the couch. We've got a family unit on standby if you need someone more specialized for child protection. She's fine here with me. Understood, but if that changes, let us know. They finished their sweep and stepped back into the hallway. Through the door, Ethan could hear them taking up positions. He locked everything again and went to sit next to Maya, watching her sleep, wondering what the hell he was supposed to tell her when she woke up. Oik. Maya took the news better than Ethan expected. She asked questions, why they were staying at Ms. Sinclair's place, whether she could bring her stuffed animals, if there would be puzzles there too. Ethan answered as honestly as he could without scaring her. They were staying somewhere safe for a few days. Yes, she could bring her animals, and he was sure Miss Sinclair would have puzzles. Is it because of the man at school? Maya asked while Ethan packed her clothes. Yeah, baby, it is. Eat. Did he want to hurt me? Ethan stopped packing. He turned to look at his daughter sitting on her bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in both hands. 6 years old. Too young to be asking questions like that. I don't know what he wanted, Ethan said carefully, but I'm not going to let him try again. Okay. Maya hugged the rabbit tighter. Can Ms. Sinclair keep us safe? Yeah, she can. Because she's rich? The question caught Ethan off guard. What makes you say that? Her building is really big, and she has a lot of people working for her, and Rachel said Miss Sinclair is important. Maya looked up at him with Sarah's eyes. Does being rich mean you can keep people safe? Ethan sat down on the bed next to her. Sometimes rich people have more resources, more help, but that's not what keeps you safe. Then what does? People who care enough to fight for you. Maya thought about that. Do you fight for me, Daddy? Every day, baby. Every single day. She leaned against him and he put his arm around her small shoulders. Outside, he could hear Richards and Torres talking quietly in the hallway. Security guards posted outside his apartment because he'd found fraud in the wrong company's books. because he'd testified in front of a board of executives, because he'd thought he could help someone and walk away clean.
Daddy. Maya's voice was small. I miss Mommy. Me too, baby. Would she be scared right now?
Ethan thought about Sarah, about her laugh and her stubbornness and the way she'd never backed down from anything that mattered. No, she'd be mad and she'd be figuring out how to fix it.
Like you?
Like me. Maya pulled back to look at him. Are you going to fix it?
I'm going to try.
That's what Mommy would say.
She hugged him tight. I think you're doing good, Daddy.
Something cracked in Ethan's chest. He held his daughter and tried not to think about all the ways he was barely holding things together, barely making rent, barely keeping her safe. Tried not to think about Sarah and what she would actually say if she could see them now, hiding from corporate threats, moving to a stranger's apartment, dragging their daughter through chaos because Ethan couldn't just walk away when he saw something wrong. Sarah would probably say he was an idiot. She'd also probably say she loved him anyway. Vivian's apartment was in a building that made the Grandview Hotel look modest. The lobby had actual marble columns. The elevator required a key card just to access the residential floors. The doorman greeted them by name and had already been briefed on the security situation. When they stepped out on the 42nd floor, there were only 2 doors in the entire hallway. Vivian opened the one on the right. The apartment was huge, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that looked like it came from magazines, a kitchen bigger than Ethan's entire living room. Maya's eyes went wide.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Ethan agreed quietly. Whoa.
Vivian appeared from somewhere deeper in the apartment wearing jeans and a sweater that somehow still looked expensive. She'd pulled her hair back in a ponytail. Without the suit and the corporate armor, she looked younger, more real. You made it, she said. Traffic was light. Ethan set down their bags. Vivian, this is necessary and temporary. She looked at Maya. Hi, Maya. Remember me? Maya nodded, suddenly shy. I set up a room for you. Want to see it? She led them down a hallway past what looked like a home office and a guest room into a space that had clearly been prepared for a child. Soft carpet, a bed with clean sheets, and an entire shelf of books and puzzles that must have been delivered overnight. Maya gasped. Is this for me? For as long as you're staying, Vivian said. The bathroom is right through that door. If you need anything, just ask. Maya ran to the shelf and started examining the puzzles. Ethan stood in the doorway feeling completely out of place. This apartment probably cost more per month than he made in a year. The puzzles on that shelf cost more than his weekly grocery budget, and Vivian had arranged all of it in less than 24 hours because someone had threatened his daughter. Thank you, he said quietly. Vivian looked at him. You don't have to thank me.
Yeah, I do.
You're here because I hired you to expose fraud and Hamilton retaliated. This is the least I can do. You could have just paid me and walked away. Let me deal with the consequences on my own. I could have, but I didn't. Vivian paused. Your room is across the hall. Get settled. We need to talk about next steps. She left. Ethan helped Maya unpack her stuffed animals and got her situated with a puzzle, then crossed the hall to the room Vivian had mentioned. It was simple compared to the rest of the apartment. A bed, a dresser, windows with a view of the park, clean and impersonal. He dropped his bag on the bed and stood there for a moment, looking out at Manhattan stretched below him, trying to figure out how his life had gone from fixing small business spreadsheets to hiding in a billionaire's apartment in less than a week. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Kitchen, coffee's ready. He found her sitting at the kitchen island with a laptop open and 2 mugs of coffee already poured. She gestured at the second mug. Black, right? How did you know?
What?
You drank it black at the office. I pay attention. She turned the laptop so he could see the screen. My lawyers filed for a restraining order this morning. Temporary order was granted.
Hamilton Strategic and all affiliated employees are required to stay at least 500 feet from you, Maya, or any location you regularly frequent. Does that actually stop them?
It makes it illegal for them to approach you. If they violate it, they can be arrested. It's not a guarantee, but it's a deterrent. Ethan picked up the coffee and took a drink.
It was good, better than the instant powder he used at home. What about school? I've arranged for a private security detail. 2 guards, both with experience in family protection. They'll escort Maya to and from school and maintain a presence on campus during the day. That's going to scare her. It's going to keep her safe. Vivian's tone was matter-of-fact. Scared is temporary. Dead is permanent. I'd rather deal with temporary. She wasn't wrong. How long do we need to keep this up? Ethan asked. Depends on Hamilton's next move. If they accept the restraining order and back off, maybe a week or 2. If they decide to fight. She trailed off. Then what? Then we go to the police with everything you found. File criminal charges. Turn this into a federal investigation. Vivian looked at him over her coffee. But that's a last resort. Vivian looked at him over. Federal investigations take months, maybe years. And during that time, you'd be a witness in an ongoing case, which means Hamilton's lawyers would have access to your life in ways you won't enjoy. They already tried to grab my daughter. How much worse can it get? You don't want to know. Yeah. The kitchen fell quiet. Ethan could hear Maya in the other room, humming to herself while she did her puzzle. Normal kid sounds in an abnormal situation. I'm sorry, Vivian said suddenly. For what? For bringing you into this. I knew Hamilton was dangerous. I should have anticipated they'd retaliate. You warned me they might. I said they might fight back. I didn't say they'd target your daughter. Vivian set down her coffee. That was a miscalculation on my part. I thought corporate lawyers and board votes. I didn't think threats against children. You didn't send that man to Maya's school. Hamilton did. I created the situation that made them feel threatened enough to do it. Ethan studied her. In the soft morning light coming through the windows, Vivian looked tired. Not just physically, but in a deeper way that matched how Ethan felt most days. Like she'd been fighting battles for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like not to be fighting. How long have you been doing this? He asked. Doing what? Running companies. Making decisions that affect hundreds of people. Fighting people like Hamilton. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I took over Sinclair Digital when I was 26. My father built it, but he died of a heart attack during a merger negotiation. The board wanted to sell. I convinced them to let me try running it instead. She smiled slightly. They thought I'd fail within a year. But you didn't. No. I fired half the executives, restructured the company, and tripled our revenue in 18 months. And I've been fighting to keep control ever since. She looked out the window. People assume power means you get to do whatever you want. But really it means everyone wants something from you, and your job is to figure out who to trust and who to fight. Sounds exhausting. It is. Then why do it? Oh, because someone has to, and I'm good at it. Vivian turned back to him. Why do you keep taking care of Maya by yourself instead of asking for help? The question caught him off guard. She's my daughter. You could have family help, friends, support systems. Sarah's family blamed me for the accident. My family's in Oregon, and we haven't spoken in years. And friends. Ethan shrugged. Friends disappeared after the funeral. People don't know what to do with a widowed single dad. They send casseroles for a week and then move on with their lives. So you just handle everything alone. I don't have a choice. More, you always have a choice, Vivian said. You're just choosing to carry it yourself instead of trusting other people to help. Jispit, says the woman who runs a company by herself. I have a board, executives, staff, but you don't trust them. Not really. Ethan met her eyes. That's why you hired me. Because I was nobody. Because I didn't have connections or conflicts of interest or reasons to protect Hamilton. You trusted me because I had nothing to gain from lying to you. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. You're more perceptive than I gave you credit for. I'm good at reading people. It's part of the job. What do you read from me? Ethan considered lying, considered giving her some safe, polite answer that wouldn't complicate things. But Vivian had opened her home to him and his daughter, had arranged security and lawyers and restraining orders, and she'd done it all without asking for anything in return. She deserved honesty. I think you're lonely, he said quietly. I think you have power and money and success,
But you don't have people. Not really. You have employees and board members and lawyers, but you don't have anyone who sees you as just Vivian instead of Ms. Sinclair, CEO. Vivian's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. That's a bold assumption. Am I wrong? She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her coffee and stood. I need to make some calls. Make yourself at home. There's food in the fridge. Maya can watch TV if she wants. I'll be in my office if you need anything. She walked away before Ethan could respond. He sat there alone in the kitchen, drinking expensive coffee in an apartment that cost more than most people made in a lifetime, wondering if he'd just crossed a line he shouldn't have crossed. The next 3 days fell into an uneasy routine. Ethan worked from Vivian's apartment, finishing projects for his regular clients, while Vivian made calls and held video conferences in her office. Maya went to school with 2 security guards who walked her to class and picked her up afterward. In the evenings, they ate dinner together, sometimes takeout, sometimes meals Vivian's housekeeper prepared before leaving for the day. It felt strange, domestic in a way that wasn't quite real, like they were playing house while waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the 4th morning, Vivian's phone rang during breakfast. She glanced at the screen and her expression hardened. I need to take this. She disappeared into her office. Ethan cleaned up the breakfast dishes while Maya colored at the kitchen table. 10 minutes later, Vivian emerged looking furious. What happened? Ethan asked. Hamilton filed a defamation lawsuit. They're claiming your report contained false allegations that damaged their reputation and business relationships. She was already typing on her phone. It's baseless. Everything you found is documented and verifiable, but it's going to tie us up in court for months. Can they do that? They can file whatever they want. Whether it survives summary judgment is another question. Vivian looked up from her phone. This is a pressure tactic. They're trying to make continuing the fight more expensive and time-consuming than just settling quietly. What happens if we settle? Hamilton gets to keep stealing. Your daughter's hospital stays vulnerable, and every other company they're defrauding continues getting robbed. Vivian's jaw was set. We're not settling. Then what? Then we fight. My lawyers will file a motion to dismiss. Meanwhile, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to dig deeper into Hamilton's other partnerships. If we can prove they've done this to multiple companies, it strengthens our defense and potentially opens them up to federal prosecution. Vivian paused. But it means more time, more work, and more risk if Hamilton figures out what we're doing. Ethan looked over at Maya, coloring pictures of flowers and butterflies, completely oblivious to the legal war happening around her. Then he looked back at Vivian standing in her expensive apartment wearing determination like armor. How much deeper? He asked. All the way. Every company they've partnered with in the last 5 years, every acquisition they've brokered, every financial relationship they've touched. She met his eyes. I'm asking you to spend weeks, maybe months, building a case that could put Hamilton's executives in federal prison. And I'm asking you to do it while they're actively trying to destroy you. What's the pay? Same rate as before, plus legal protection, plus security for Maya. Vivian's expression softened slightly. Plus a guarantee that I'll personally make sure nothing happens to either of you. You can't guarantee that. I can try. Ethan thought about walking away, about taking Maya and disappearing back to their apartment, back to fixing small business spreadsheets, back to a life that was exhausting, but at least predictable. Thought about letting someone else fight Hamilton while he focused on keeping his daughter fed and safe and enrolled in school. But he also thought about the numbers he'd seen, about 18 million stolen, about hospital programs getting gutted, about other consultants and whistleblowers who'd probably tried to expose Hamilton and gotten crushed for their trouble. Someone had to fight back. Okay, he said. I'm in. Vivian nodded. Then let's bury them. Moss said, The investigation consumed the next 6 weeks. Ethan set up a workspace in Vivian's guest room, surrounding himself with monitors and file boxes and transaction logs from every company Hamilton Strategic had touched in the last 5 years. 23 partnerships, 41 acquisitions, hundreds of millions in transferred funds. And underneath all of it, the same pattern he'd found at Sinclair Digital. Inflated purchase prices, secondary accounts, money disappearing into offshore holdings. Hamilton wasn't just stealing from Vivian. They'd been running the same scheme on at least 8 other companies. By the end of week 3, Ethan had documented over $60 million in confirmed fraud. By week 5, he'd traced the money through shell companies in Delaware, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg, all leading back to accounts controlled by Hamilton's senior executives. The evidence was overwhelming. Federal prosecutors would have enough to file charges that could put people in prison for decades. But building the case meant long hours hunched over spreadsheets while Maya did homework at the kitchen table. Meant missing bedtimes because he was chasing another transaction thread. Meant falling asleep on the couch with his laptop still open, waking up to find Vivian had covered him with a blanket sometime during the night. The apartment had stopped feeling temporary. Maya had friends over for play dates supervised by security guards who tried to look inconspicuous. Ethan knew which coffee mug was his and where Vivian kept the good snacks. They'd developed routines, breakfast together before Maya left for school, dinner around 7 unless Vivian had late meetings, quiet evenings where Maya watched cartoons while Ethan worked and Vivian reviewed contracts. It felt dangerously close to normal. On a Tuesday evening in the 6th week, Ethan found something that made his stomach drop. He'd been tracing funds from a Hamilton partnership with a healthcare investment firm called Apex Medical Holdings. The numbers had seemed routine at first, another inflated acquisition, another offshore transfer. But when he cross-referenced Apex's investment portfolio, one name jumped out at him: Mercy General Hospital Foundation. Hamilton had partnered with the same firm that controlled funding for Maya's hospital, and according to the transaction logs, they'd been siphoning money from Apex the same way they'd stolen from Sinclair Digital, which meant the hospital foundation had been losing millions without knowing it, which meant programs were getting cut not because of budget constraints, but because Hamilton was stealing the money, including Maya's treatment program. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the screen, feeling rage build in his chest like pressure. Hamilton hadn't just threatened his daughter. They'd been actively stealing from the fund that was keeping her alive. Every missed treatment, every delayed medication, every time the hospital had told him they were cutting services, Hamilton had been behind it all. Ethan? He looked up. Vivian was standing in the doorway of the guest room wearing an expression that said she'd been watching him for a while. "You okay?" she asked. "No." He turned the monitor so she could see. Hamilton's been stealing from Mercy General's foundation, not just sitting on the board, actively draining funds through their partnership with Apex Medical. Vivian walked over and studied the screen. Her jaw tightened. "How much?" "What? At least $12 million over 2 years, maybe more if I dig deeper." Ethan's hands were shaking. "Maya's program got cut last year. They told me it was budget limitations, but it wasn't. It was Hamilton stealing the money that should have paid for her treatments. Can you prove it?" "I can prove the theft from Apex. I can prove Apex controls Mercy General's foundation funding. The connection is there." Vivian pulled out her phone and made a call. "Thomas, I need you to pull every document related to our Mercy General charity partnerships. Everything. I want it on my desk by morning." She paused. "Because we're about to expose the people who've been stealing from sick children, and I want to make sure we have every piece of evidence before we go public." She hung up and looked at Ethan. "We're taking this to the FBI." "When?" "As soon as you finish documenting everything. Another week, maybe 2. We need the case airtight before we hand it over." She sat down on the edge of the desk. "Are you going to be okay?" "I don't know." Ethan rubbed his face. "I keep thinking about all the times Maya asked why she couldn't see her specialist anymore. All the times I told her we'd figure it out, we'd find another way. And the whole time Hamilton was just stealing the money. It's not your fault. Feels like it should be somebody's fault." "It is. Hamilton's." Vivian's voice was hard. "And we're going to make sure they pay for it." Ethan wanted to believe her. But he'd spent 6 weeks building a case against people with unlimited resources and no conscience, and he'd learned that justice wasn't guaranteed just because you had evidence. Sometimes bad people won. Sometimes they walked away clean while the people they'd hurt were left picking up the pieces. "What if we're wrong?" he said quietly. "What if we hand this to the FBI and they don't do anything? What if Hamilton's lawyers are good enough to make it all disappear?" Vivian was quiet for a moment. "Then we tried. And that's more than most people do." It wasn't the reassurance Ethan wanted. But it was honest, and he appreciated that more than empty promises.
I need to see Maya, he said. He found her in her room reading one of the books from Vivian's shelf. She looked up when he came in and smiled. Hi, Daddy. Hey, baby. How was school?
Good. We learned about fractions.
Yeah, you like fractions? They're okay. Maya set down her book. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always. Are we going to live here forever? The question hit Ethan sideways.
What makes you ask that?
We've been here a long time, and you seem happy here, and Ms. Sinclair is nice. Maya twisted the edge of her blanket. I like it here, but I miss our apartment. I miss my room.
Ethan sat down on the bed next to her. We're not staying here forever, just until it's safe to go home. When will it be safe? Soon, I hope. Do you promise? Ethan thought about all the promises he'd made over the last 3 years. Promises that things would get better, that Maya would be okay, that they'd figure everything out together. Some of those promises he'd kept. Others had broken despite his best efforts. I promise I'm trying, he said. Maya hugged him. That's good enough. Later that night, after Maya was asleep and Ethan had gone back to work, Vivian appeared in the doorway again with 2 glasses of wine. Take a break, she said. I'm almost done with the Apex files. I don't care. Take a break. She handed him one of the glasses and sat down in the chair across from his desk. Ethan took a sip. The wine was good, probably expensive, like everything else in this apartment. Maya asked me today if you're going to live here forever, Vivian said. Ethan looked up sharply. When? This afternoon, when I got home. She was doing homework and I asked how school was. The question just came up. Vivian swirled her wine. What did you tell her? That we're staying until it's safe to go home. And when will that be? I don't know. When Hamilton's in prison? When the FBI finishes their investigation? When I can afford security for our apartment? Ethan set down his glass. I don't have a good answer. Maybe you don't need to go home. The words hung in the air between them. What are you saying? Ethan asked carefully. I'm saying you've been here 6 weeks and the apartment works. Maya's happy. You're doing good work, and Vivian paused. I like having you both here. Vivian, I'm not asking you to stay forever. I'm not even asking you to make a decision right now. I'm just saying the option exists if you want it. She met his eyes. This apartment has 5 bedrooms. Maya already has her own space. You could have a real office instead of working out of the guest room. And Maya would have security, stability, access to the best schools in the city. In exchange for what? Nothing. It's not a transaction. Vivian's expression was more open than Ethan had ever seen it. I spent 6 years building a company and convinced myself that was enough. That success and power and control meant I'd achieve something meaningful. But you and Maya have been here 6 weeks, and I've laughed more in that time than I have in 6 years. So maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe I want you to stay because it makes this place feel less empty. Ethan didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to point out all the reasons it was a bad idea, that they barely knew each other, that Vivian's life was corporate warfare and private security and legal battles, that Maya needed stability, not uncertainty. But another part of him, the part that was exhausted from 3 years of doing everything alone, wanted to say yes. Wanted to accept the help and the space and the feeling that maybe he didn't have to carry everything by himself anymore. I can't give you an answer right now, he said finally. I know. And I need to think about what's best for Maya. Of course. But Ethan took another sip of wine. Thank you for the offer. It means something that you'd ask. Vivian smiled slightly. You're welcome. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking wine and not talking about the future or Hamilton or FBI investigations. Just existing in the same space without needing to fill it with words. Eventually, Vivian stood up. Get some sleep. The Apex files will still be there tomorrow. Yeah, probably. She paused at the door. Ethan, for what it's worth, I think Maya's right. You seem happier here. She left before he could respond. Ethan sat alone in his guest room, surrounded by evidence of corporate fraud and financial crime, thinking about happiness and what it meant. He'd spent 3 years measuring his life in survival metrics. Maya fed, bills paid, medical appointments kept. Happiness hadn't been part of the equation. It had seemed frivolous compared to the immediate needs of keeping a 6-year-old alive and healthy. But Vivian was right. He did feel different here. Less exhausted. Less alone. Like maybe there was space for something beyond just surviving. The realization scared him more than Hamilton's threats ever had. The next morning, Thomas Wright called with news. "We found something," he said when Vivian put him on speaker. One of Hamilton's junior analysts reached out to our legal team. He wants to cooperate. Vivian and Ethan exchanged glances across the kitchen table. Maya was still asleep down the hall. "Cooperate how?" Vivian asked. "He's willing to testify. Says he has internal communications proving the senior executives knew about the fraud and actively covered it up. Emails, recorded calls, strategy memos, everything." "Why now?" Ethan said. "Hamilton's been doing this for years. Why is he coming forward now?" "He says he's got a kid, 4 years old. He found out Hamilton was stealing from children's hospitals, and it was too much." Thomas paused. "He also said he heard about your daughter, Ethan. Said if Hamilton was willing to threaten a 6-year-old, he couldn't stay silent anymore." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Somewhere in Hamilton's offices, there was a father who'd made the same calculation he had, that protecting children mattered more than protecting yourself. "Can we trust him?" Vivian asked. "Our lawyers are vetting him now, but if his evidence is real, it changes everything. We wouldn't need to wait for the FBI. We could file criminal complaints directly with the U.S. Attorney's Office." "How fast?" "A week, maybe less." After they hung up, Vivian turned to Ethan. "This is it. If his evidence holds up, we can end this. And if it doesn't, then we're exactly where we were before, still building the case, still waiting." She paused. "But I think it's real. I think Hamilton finally pushed someone too far." Ethan wanted to feel relieved. Instead, he felt tense, like they were standing on the edge of something that could still go wrong in 1,000 different ways. "I need to finish the Apex documentation," he said. "If we're going to the U.S. attorney, I want everything ready." "Ethan, I need to work, Vivian. It's the only thing I can control right now." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but pace yourself. We've got time." Quotes. But they didn't have time. 3 days later, the New York Times broke the story. Someone had leaked details about Hamilton Strategic's fraud to the press. Not everything. Not the hospital connections or the full scope of the theft, but enough to make headlines: corporate fraud, offshore accounts, whistleblower allegations. Hamilton's name was suddenly all over the news. Ethan found out when his phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. Reporters, journalists, someone from a podcast asking for an interview. He ignored them all and went to find Vivian. She was in her office already dressed and on the phone, her expression grim. When she saw Ethan, she held up one finger and finished her call. "That was our PR team," she said. "The Times story just went live. They're calling it the biggest corporate fraud case in a decade. Who leaked it? Well, we don't know. Could have been the analyst who came forward. Could have been someone else inside Hamilton. Could have been the FBI if someone on our legal team already contacted them." Vivian pulled up the article on her computer and turned the screen toward him. "Either way, it's out now." Ethan read the headline: Hamilton Strategic accused of systematic fraud. Whistleblowers allege millions stolen through shell companies. The article didn't name him specifically, but it mentioned Sinclair Digital and referenced an anonymous consultant who'd first identified the fraud. It quoted anonymous sources inside Hamilton claiming the company had been running similar schemes on multiple partners. And it included a statement from Hamilton's lawyers calling the allegations baseless and politically motivated. "This changes everything," Ethan said. "Yes, it does. Hamilton's going to know we're the source. They're going to come after us harder. Probably." Vivian closed the laptop. "But they're also going to be dealing with federal investigators and public scrutiny and clients demanding audits. They'll be too busy protecting themselves to focus on revenge." "You hope." "I hope." Ethan's phone rang again. Another reporter. He declined the call and looked at Vivian. "What do we do now?" We wait. Let the story develop. Let the pressure build on Hamilton, and we keep our heads down until the U.S. attorney decides whether to file charges. And Maya? Maya stays in school with security. You both stay here. Nothing changes, except now the world knows what Hamilton's been doing. Vivian paused. That's a good thing, Ethan. This is what winning looks like. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing in the open waiting for someone to take a shot. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of the guest room looking out at Manhattan glittering below, thinking about the Times article and Hamilton's lawyers and the analyst with a 4-year-old who'd decided to come forward, thinking about Maya asleep down the hall and Vivian in her own room and the strange temporary life they'd built together over the last 6 weeks. Someone knocked softly on the door. "Come in," Ethan said. Vivian entered wearing pajamas and carrying the bottle of wine from earlier. "Figured you'd be awake. Can't turn my brain off." "Yeah, me neither." She poured 2 glasses without asking and handed him one. "Congratulations. You just took down a major corporate fraud operation." "We took it down." "You found it. I just provided the resources." Vivian stood next to him at the window. "You should feel good about this." "I mostly feel terrified." "That's normal." They drank in silence for a while, watching the city lights. "Maya asked me today if you were my girlfriend," Vivian said suddenly. Ethan nearly choked on his wine. "What did you tell her?" "I told her we were friends. She asked if friends usually live together. I said sometimes they do when they're helping each other." Vivian smiled slightly. She seemed satisfied with that answer. Kids ask complicated questions. "They really do." Vivian turned to look at him. "Are we friends, Ethan?" "Us. I think so, yeah." "Good, because I don't have many of those." She paused. "Actually, I don't have any of those. So you and Maya are pretty much it. That's depressing." "Little bit, yeah." Ethan set down his wine glass. "For what it's worth, I'm glad we're friends. Even though I dragged you into a corporate war that put your daughter at risk? Even though—" Vivian looked like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she just nodded and refilled both their glasses. They stood at the window together until the wine was gone and the city started waking up, not talking about the future or Hamilton or what happened next, just being 2 people who'd accidentally become important to each other while fighting a battle neither of them had chosen. When Vivian finally went back to her room, Ethan lay down on his bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about friendship and family and the strange ways people ended up mattering to each other. He still couldn't sleep, but at least he didn't feel quite so alone anymore. The U.S. Attorney's Office called 2 days later. They wanted to meet, review evidence, discuss testimony. The Hamilton analyst's information had checked out, and combined with everything Ethan had documented, they had enough to file federal charges. Vivian took the meeting with her lawyers. Ethan stayed at the apartment with Maya, trying not to watch the clock, trying not to imagine all the ways this could still fall apart. When Vivian came back 4 hours later, she looked exhausted but satisfied. "They're filing charges," she said. "Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, the works. Arrest warrants for 3 Hamilton executives, including David Chen." Ethan sat down on the couch. "It's really over? The criminal part is just starting, but the threat to you and Maya, that's over. Hamilton's executives will be too busy dealing with federal prosecutors to worry about revenge." Vivian sat down next to him. "You're safe, both of you." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes Hamilton to realize they've lost." She looked at him. "You did it, Ethan. You found the fraud, documented everything, and now the people responsible are going to prison." Ethan thought about Maya's hospital program, about the millions stolen from sick children, about the Hamilton analyst with a 4-year-old who'd decided enough was enough. "We did it," he corrected. "All of us." Vivian smiled. "Yeah, we did." Maya came running in from her room, still in her school uniform. "Daddy, Miss Sinclair, can we have pizza for dinner?" "Sure, baby," Ethan said. "Whatever you want. Can we eat in the living room and watch a movie?" Vivian looked at Ethan. He shrugged. "Why not?" They ordered pizza and sat on Vivian's expensive couch, eating straight from the box while Maya picked an animated movie about talking animals. Halfway through, Maya fell asleep between them, her head on Ethan's shoulder, her feet in Vivian's lap. Ethan looked over at Vivian and found her looking back at him. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "It really is." They finished the movie in silence, neither of them moving because they didn't want to wake Maya, both of them pretending this was normal instead of complicated. When the credits rolled, Ethan finally spoke. "Vivian, about your offer, about staying here. You don't have to answer. I want to, not forever, not permanently, but maybe for a while longer, until we figure out what comes next." He paused. "If the offer's still open," Vivian's expression softened. "It's open? Then yeah, we'll stay." "Okay. Okay." They sat there with Maya sleeping between them, the movie credits scrolling past, the apartment quiet except for the sound of the city beyond the windows. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan let himself believe that maybe everything was going to be all right. Maybe not perfect, maybe not easy, but all right. And for now, that was enough. The federal arrests happened on a Wednesday morning. Ethan found out from the news like everyone else. Helicopters circling Hamilton's Strategics headquarters, FBI agents walking executives out in handcuffs, reporters shouting questions that nobody answered. David Chen was among the arrested. So were 2 other senior partners whose names Ethan recognized from the transaction logs he'd spent weeks documenting. Maya was eating breakfast when the story came on. She glanced at the TV, then back at her cereal. "Is that the bad people, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby, that's them." "Are they going to jail?" "Probably." "Good." She said it with the simple certainty of a child who understood that people who hurt others should face consequences. Then she went back to her cereal like the news was just background noise. Vivian was on the phone in her office dealing with calls from investors and board members who wanted to know what Sinclair Digital's role had been in the investigation. Ethan could hear her through the door, patient but firm, explaining that they'd cooperated fully with federal authorities and had no further comment while the case was pending. When she finally emerged 2 hours later, she looked drained. "That was fun," she said, pouring herself coffee that had gone cold. Nothing like explaining to nervous investors that exposing corporate fraud is actually good for business. They worried about blowback? Some of them. Others are just mad they weren't told sooner. Vivian took a sip of the coffee and made a face. "I should probably make a fresh pot." "I'll do it." Ethan stood and started the coffee maker. "You okay? "I'm fine, just tired of talking." She sat down at the kitchen table. "The U.S. attorney called. They want you to testify at the grand jury hearing next month." "Already?" "They're moving fast. Public pressure, media attention. They want to capitalize on the momentum before Hamilton's lawyers can muddy the waters." Ethan poured the fresh coffee and brought 2 mugs to the table. Ethan poured the, "What do I need to do?" "Show up. Tell the truth. Walk them through your findings." Vivian wrapped her hands around the mug. "They said it should be straightforward. You're not on trial. You're just explaining how you found the fraud. And after that? After that, we wait for the trial. Could be months. Could be a year." She looked at him. "But the threat is over, Ethan. Hamilton's executives are in custody. The company's under federal investigation. Nobody's coming after you or Maya anymore." He said, It should have felt like relief. Instead, Ethan felt strange, untethered, like he'd been bracing for impact for so long that standing upright without the weight felt wrong. "What do we do now?" he asked. Vivian smiled slightly. "Whatever we want." The question lingered for days. Maya's security detail was scaled back to 1 guard who mostly stayed in the car during school pickup. The reporters stopped calling. Life started returning to something that resembled normal, except Ethan and Maya were still living in Vivian's apartment, and nobody had talked about when that might change. A week after the arrests, Ethan's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it. Then something made him answer. "Mr. Cole, this is Rebecca Martinez from Mercy General Hospital Foundation." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Is everything okay? Is it about Maya's treatment?" No, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm calling because we've recovered the funds that were stolen from our foundation. The FBI seized Hamilton's offshore accounts, and the court approved returning the money to the organizations they defrauded. Rebecca's voice was warm. Rebecca's voice was up. "We're reinstating all the programs that were cut. including the pediatric specialist care. Maya's treatment will resume at full capacity. The words took a moment to land. All of it? Mom. Boiti.
All of it. And Mr. Cole, I wanted to thank you personally. The FBI told us you were instrumental in uncovering the fraud. You didn't just help your daughter. You helped hundreds of children who depend on these programs.
Igo. After the call ended, Ethan sat on the couch staring at his phone, trying to process what he'd just heard. Maya's treatment was back. Not partially funded, not contingent on budget reviews. Fully restored because he'd found numbers that didn't add up and decided to do something about it. You all right? He looked up. Vivian was standing in the doorway of her office. The hospital called, Ethan said. They're restoring Maya's program. All the stolen money is being returned. Vivian walked over and sat down next to him. That's good news. Yeah, it is. He rubbed his face. I spent 3 years watching that program get cut piece by piece, watching Maya lose access to specialists, seeing other families struggle, and the whole time I thought it was just budget problems, just the reality of underfunded healthcare. But it wasn't. No, it was theft. And if I hadn't walked into your hotel lobby that night, it would have kept happening. Ethan looked at her. How many other hospitals are out there getting robbed by people like Hamilton? How many kids are losing treatment because nobody's checking the numbers? I don't know. Probably more than we want to think about. Somebody should do something about that. Vivian studied him. You thinking about making it your job? Maybe. I don't know. Ethan stood and walked to the windows. I've spent 8 years fixing spreadsheets for small businesses. It's steady work, pays the bills. But it's not... He paused, searching for the right words. It doesn't matter, not the way this mattered. Fraud investigation matters, but it's also dangerous and exhausting. And you've got a daughter to raise. Is she... I know, but Maya's going to grow up someday. She's going to ask what her father did with his life. And I want to tell her something better than, I played it safe. He turned back to Vivian. You offered me a job once, extended consulting, building cases against companies like Hamilton. Is that offer still open? You want to work for me? I want to work with you. There's a difference. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Yeah, the offer's still open. Then I'm in, but I need conditions. Name them. Flexible hours. I pick Maya up from school. I'm home for dinner. And if she needs me, work stops. No exceptions. Done. And I want to focus on healthcare fraud. Hospitals, foundations, medical charities. Places where stealing actually kills people. We can do that. Ethan extended his hand. Vivian shook it, her grip firm. Welcome aboard, she said. That night at dinner, Maya asked when they were going home. The question caught both adults off guard. Vivian set down her fork. Ethan took a breath. Do you want to go home? He asked carefully. Maya thought about it. I miss our apartment. Maya's mat. But I like it here too, and Miss Sinclair has better puzzles. I can get you better puzzles at our apartment, Ethan said. But then Miss Sinclair would be alone. Maya looked between them with serious eyes. Would she be sad if we left? Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. Ethan saw something vulnerable cross her face, the same expression she'd had weeks ago when he'd told her she was lonely. I would miss you both, Vivian said quietly, but you should do what's best for your family. You're part of our family now, Maya said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Right, Daddy? Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Vivian sitting across the table in the apartment that had somehow become home over the last 2 months. He thought about all the meals they'd shared, the quiet evenings, the way Maya had stopped asking when they were leaving and started asking what was for breakfast. He thought about Vivian covering him with blankets when he fell asleep working, about security guards and legal teams and the way she'd fought for them without asking for anything in return. Yeah, he said. She is. Vivian's eyes were shining slightly. She blinked and looked away. Well then, I guess that settles it. Settles what? Maya asked. That you're staying, Vivian said. If you want to, we can make it official, get your old apartment packed up, Move your things here properly. Turn the guest room into a real office for your dad. Maya looked at Ethan. Can we, Daddy? You sure? Ethan asked Vivian. It's a big commitment. You'll be stuck with a 6-year-old doing homework at your kitchen table and me probably working weird hours chasing fraud cases. I've run a billion-dollar company through 3 recessions and a federal investigation. I think I can handle a first grader and a workaholic consultant. Vivian smiled. Besides, Maya's right. This place is too quiet when it's just me. Okay then. Ethan reached across the table and took Vivian's hand. We'll stay. Maya cheered. Vivian squeezed his hand and didn't let go. The grand jury hearing happened 3 weeks later. Ethan spent 4 hours walking prosecutors through spreadsheets and transaction logs, explaining how he'd traced the fraud from Sinclair Digital through 8 other companies and eventually to Mercy General's foundation. The grand jury listened intently, asked smart questions, and by the end of this day had voted to indict all 3 Hamilton executives on 14 federal charges. When Ethan left the courthouse, Vivian was waiting outside with Maya. How'd it go? Vivian asked. They indicted. All of them. Maya tugged on his sleeve. Does that mean you won, Daddy? Yeah, baby, we won. Good. She hugged him tight. Can we get ice cream? They got ice cream. Then they went home to the apartment that was officially home now, with Ethan's things moved from storage and Maya's room properly decorated, and photographs of Sarah mixed with new pictures of the 3 of them together. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Ethan started working full-time investigating healthcare fraud for Sinclair Digital's newly formed ethics division. Vivian restructured the company with unprecedented transparency measures that made national news. Maya thrived in school with the security of knowing her treatment was safe and her family was stable. The Hamilton trial lasted 6 weeks. Ethan testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the same evidence he'd shown the grand jury. The defense attorneys tried to discredit him, questioned his credentials, suggested he had ulterior motives, implied he'd fabricated evidence to help Vivian, but the numbers spoke for themselves. And when the Hamilton analyst with the 4-year-old took the stand and confirmed everything Ethan had found, the case was effectively over. All 3 executives were convicted. Chen got 12 years. The others got 8 and 10 respectively. Hamilton Strategic collapsed within weeks, its assets seized, its clients fleeing, its reputation destroyed. On the day the verdict came down, Ethan picked Maya up from school and took her to the park. They sat on a bench watching other kids play while Maya ate apple slices from her lunchbox. The bad people went to jail, Ethan said. The ones who tried to hurt you. They can't hurt anyone anymore. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Is that why you've been sad sometimes? I wasn't sad, just worried. Mommy says it's okay to be sad sometimes. She says being sad means you care about things. There it was again. Maya's conversations with Sarah. Ethan had stopped correcting her. His therapist said it was healthy, that Maya was processing grief in her own way. And honestly, sometimes it felt like Sarah was still around, still offering advice through their daughter. Mommy's right, Ethan said. Being sad means you care. Do you care about Ms. Sinclair? The question was casual, but Ethan heard the weight behind it. Yeah, I do. Like you cared about Mommy? Different, but yeah, shut. Maya was quiet for a moment. I think Mommy would like her. Miss Sinclair is nice, and she makes you smile. Ethan felt his throat tighten. You think so? Yeah, and Mommy always wanted you to be happy. Maya looked up at him with serious eyes. So it's okay if you like Miss Sinclair. I think Mommy would say so. Ethan pulled his daughter close and held her, thinking about Sarah and Vivian and the strange, unexpected way grief and hope could exist in the same space. I love you, baby, he said. I love you too, Daddy. 6 months after the verdict, Sinclair Digital launched the Sinclair Foundation for Healthcare Transparency, a nonprofit dedicated to investigating fraud in medical charities and hospital systems. Ethan ran it with a team of forensic accountants and former federal investigators. They recovered over $200 million in stolen funds in their first year alone, helping restore programs in 17 hospitals across 8 states. The foundation's launch event was held in a hotel ballroom with donors and press and nonprofit leaders. Ethan stood at the podium feeling wildly out of place in a suit that Vivian had insisted he buy for the occasion. 3 years ago, my daughter got sick, he began, and I learned what it's like to depend on a healthcare system that's supposed to help, but doesn't always have the resources to do it. I watch programs get cut. I watch families struggle. And I thought that was just reality, that we were powerless to change it. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Vivian sat in the front row with Maya beside her. They were both smiling. But then I found out the cuts weren't about resources. They were about theft. People stealing from hospitals, from foundations, from sick children who needed that money to survive. And I realized something important. We're not powerless. We just need to look at the numbers and be brave enough to act when they don't add up. The speech went on for another 10 minutes. Ethan talked about transparency and accountability and the responsibility wealthy people had to protect the vulnerable. When he finished, the applause was genuine. People came up afterward to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him stories about hospitals their families depended on. Vivian found him during a quiet moment near the bar. "Good speech," she said. "I'm better with spreadsheets. You're better than you think at a lot of things." She handed him a glass of champagne. "To the foundation, and to the man who made it possible." They clinked glasses. Ethan took a sip and set it down. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. You found the fraud. You built the case. You testified. I just provided resources. You provided more than that. You provided safety and family, and a reason to believe that fighting was worth it." Vivian looked at him for a long moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "The night you and Maya moved in, I sat in my office and wondered if I'd made a mistake. If I was being selfish keeping you there. If I was using your situation to fill some emptiness in my own life." She paused. "But watching you with Maya, seeing how hard you fight for her, learning who you are when you're not just surviving, I realized you're the best decision I've made in years, both of you." That's quite an endorsement from someone who runs a billion-dollar company. I'm serious, Ethan. You changed everything. This foundation exists because you cared enough to look deeper. Maya has her treatment because you wouldn't walk away, and She smiled. "I have a family. For the first time since my father died, I have people I care about who care about me back. That matters more than any business success." Ethan reached out and took her hand. "I care about you. A lot." "I know, and I care about you too." Vivian squeezed his hand, "which is why I need to ask you something, and you can say no if you want, but I need to ask anyway." "What is it?" "Would you consider making this permanent? Not just living together, not just working together, actually building a life together. You, me, Maya, a real family." Ethan's heart was pounding. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Iban. I'm asking if you'd be willing to see where this goes. No pressure, no timeline, just openness to the possibility that maybe we're good together. That maybe what we have is worth protecting the same way you protected Maya." Ethan thought about in the last 8 months, about late-night conversations and shared meals and the way Vivian had fought for them without hesitation, about Maya asking if Ms. Sinclair would be sad if they left, about building something real from the chaos of corporate fraud and federal investigations. "Yeah," he said, "I'd like to see where this goes." Vivian's smile was real and unguarded, the same expression she got when she was home with them, when she wasn't CEO Vivian Sinclair, but just Vivian, the woman who did puzzles with Maya and fell asleep on the couch during movies. "Good," she said, "because I already told Maya I was going to ask, and she made me promise to report back immediately." "What did she say when you told her?" She said it was about time because she was tired of waiting for grown-ups to figure out what was obvious. Vivian laughed. "Your daughter is very wise. She gets it from her mother." They stood together in the corner of the ballroom while the foundation launch party continued around them, holding hands, planning a future that neither of them had seen coming, but both of them wanted to build. Across the room, Maya was showing another kid the necklace Vivian had given her for her 7th birthday. She looked up, caught Ethan's eye, and gave him a thumbs up. He laughed and returned the gesture. Later that night, after the event ended and they'd gone home and put Maya to bed, Ethan and Vivian sat on the couch with glasses of wine exhausted and happy. "We did it," Vivian said. "We actually pulled it off." "The foundation or the family?" "Both." Ethan looked around the apartment, at Maya's backpack by the door, at his work files spread across the coffee table, at the photographs on the walls showing 3 people who'd become a family without really planning to. He thought about the night he'd run into this lobby carrying medicine for his sick daughter, about the moment Vivian had offered him a contract that changed everything. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said. "I spent 3 years trying to survive, trying to keep Maya healthy and bills paid and everything from falling apart. I thought that was all I could hope for, just survival. And now I'm not just surviving, I'm building something. We're building something, and it's better than anything I could have planned." Vivian rested her head on his shoulder. "Sarah would be proud of you." "How do you know?" "Because you're raising an amazing daughter, exposing fraud that's helping hundreds of families, and you're letting yourself be happy again." "What parent wouldn't be proud of that?" Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing something in me worth investing in." "You're not an investment, Ethan. You're family." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking wine and watching the city lights through the windows. Somewhere in Manhattan, there were other single parents struggling to make ends meet, other children who needed hospital programs that were being stolen from, other people who thought they were powerless to change anything. But Ethan had learned something important over the last 8 months. You weren't powerless if you looked at the numbers and refused to walk away when they didn't add up. You weren't alone if you let people help you. And you weren't stuck surviving if you were brave enough to build something better. Maya appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep. Come here, baby." Ethan opened his arms and she climbed onto the couch between him and Vivian. "Bad dream?" "Ma'am." "No, just wanted to make sure you were still here." "We're still here. We're always here." Maya curled up against him, already falling back asleep. Vivian pulled a blanket over all 3 of them. They stayed like that for a long time, 3 people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided to build something worth keeping. Outside, Manhattan kept moving. But inside that apartment, for the first time in years, everything felt still. Settled. Right. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself feel it. Not just survival, but actual peace. The kind that came from knowing your daughter was safe, your work mattered, and the people around you weren't going anywhere. "Daddy?" Maya mumbled against his chest. "Yeah, baby?" "Mommy says everything turned out okay." Ethan felt Vivian's hand find his in the darkness. "Yeah, it really did." The next morning, Ethan woke to find Maya already awake and working on a puzzle at the kitchen table. Vivian was making breakfast, humming something under her breath. The coffee was brewing. The sun was streaming through the windows. It was ordinary. Normal. The kind of morning he'd stopped believing he'd ever have again. And it was perfect precisely because it wasn't perfect. It was real and hard-won, and built from choices that had seemed impossible at the time, but turned out to be exactly right. Maya looked up from her puzzle. "Daddy, can we go to the park after school?" "Sure, baby. Whatever you want." "And can Ms. Vivian come?" Vivian turned from the stove. "I'd love to." "Good. Because I want to show you both how high I can swing now." She said it with complete confidence, a 7-year-old who believed her family would always be there to watch her fly. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan believed it too. Not because life had suddenly become easy, not because all their problems were solved, but because he'd learned that family wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, fighting for each other, building something stronger than what you started with. He'd walked into a hotel lobby carrying medicine in desperation. He was walking out with a daughter who was healthy, work that mattered, and a woman who'd stood beside him through everything without flinching. Some people might call that luck. Ethan called it what it was, the result of being brave enough to look at numbers that didn't add up and refusing to walk away until they did. The result of accepting help when it was offered. The result of believing that survival wasn't enough when you could reach for something better. Maya finished her puzzle and started another one. Vivian brought breakfast to the table. Ethan poured coffee for both of them and sat down with his family. "To new beginnings," Vivian said, raising her mug. "To family," Ethan replied. To pancakes, Maya added, making them both laugh. They ate breakfast together as the city woke up around them, three people who'd found each other in the storm and built something worth keeping. And if somewhere Sarah was watching, Ethan hoped she knew he'd kept his promise. He'd protected their daughter. He'd found happiness again. And he'd learned that sometimes the best things in life came not from careful planning, but from being brave enough to help a stranger in a hotel lobby and see where it led. The rest was just details.